Well, turns out I had like 3 play sessions left, but I played the rest of the game. It was like 4 hours, just under. I got a lot to say. Welcome back to the channel. As you can tell, I have filmed the last 2 episodes back to back. I was, I was in a mood. I was like, you know what? I want to finish this part of the project. I want to get this done. I want to finish the campaign, and I want to be able to get back to giving my thoughts as soon as possible. So, without further ado, let's just jump right back into it. So, after everything with Black Widow and Kamala, now it's time to make a move. The AIM experience is going to be showing off the new adaptoids, and the Avengers are going to use that as an opportunity to expose AIM. But in order to do that, to find out where everything is at, they're going to have to interrogate Monica, which, there's kind of some weirdness between Monica and Bruce, because I guess Bruce and Monica were together, and Black Widow kind of, you know how it goes with Black Widow and Hulk. They love each other. You know they love each other. Anyways, after the interrogations commence, Tarleton shortly comes after Monica and attacks the Chimera. Basically, it's timed in such a way to where the Chimera is being brought down to where the AIM experience is being held, and lo and behold, the God of Thunder, Thor, decides to come out of hiding. So he starts doing his thing, wreaking all kinds of havoc. We get to use him as a playable character now. After everyone kind of reassembles after, the whole AIM experience incident, Jarvis was able to decrypt some more footage that shows that Captain America was actually the one who smashed the reactor, to which Hulk and Iron Man get into a fight. They're doing their thing. Bruce Banner says it's our fault. It's our fault that this thing happened. It's our fault that, the Terrigen got out. And Kamala feels very defeated in this time period, and she goes on to kind of like search the ship, maybe see if Monica left behind some evidence. She's like, man, I wish I could really talk to my dad right now. To which Jarvis puts a phone call through, and she gets exactly the words that she needs from her dad. Kind of a, with great power comes great responsibility type moment. It's good. It's really heartfelt. It's got a lot of heart. It's a really rad moment. Kamala is able to, deduce some evidence that she has found from Monica's interrogation, to which she basically realizes that Monica had said that, scour the earth, you're not going to find our lab, and that's because the lab is actually in the sky. It's the Ambrosia. And I missed that detail somehow whenever they were talking, her and Tarleton were talking after they had captured Kamala. But in order to get to, the Ambrosia, they have to, of course, do a couple of favors, call in a couple of favors, one being for Mr. Hank Pym, a.k.a. Ant-Man. After you go help Hank Pym, and after a very long and weird boss fight, Iron Man gets the technology that allows him to use this special suit that allows him to go up into the satellite and see what's going on, to which he finds that Captain America has been the key to the Terrigen all along, as well as the experimentation for the Inhumans. You come to realize that Captain America is actually the reason that Tarleton survived. After a decent sequence with Captain America and Tony, they escape the satellite. Looks like all hope is going to be lost as they're, kind of running out of power, but then Thor comes to save them. Tarleton, of course, is pissed because he's been used as a lab rat this whole time. And then he basically gives Monica the same treatment. He's like, you've been testing me this whole time, using me as a lab rat. So now I'm going to give you a taste of your own medicine, literally. This is where it gets a little strange. To be able to progress the story to kind of like the final push, like the final suicide mission type thing, you had to do a couple of missions to acquire some materials, which felt weirdly forced. But after a couple missions, I was able to do it. So the first part of the point of no return is you basically have to go and free a bunch of the Inhumans on the ground, some of AIM's forces, and yet another lame, long boss fight, which was weirdly cumbersome to navigate. You have to fight this like big airship. But after all that, we finally get to the final push on MODOK. In this sequence, you're forced to play as all the different Avengers, playing different roles, doing different things, and you're fighting enemies at different levels because your gear is tiered differently for everybody. And after, 15, 20 minutes of this mission, you finally get to MODOK, and of course he's fully MODOK'd out. Captain America had mentioned something prior that he was, smashing the reactor because there was something in the ground that was, causing, that was calling to the reactor. I don't remember exactly how I worded it. Turns out it's a Kree sentry. So MODOK is controlling this Kree sentry, and fighting all of the Avengers, with this Sentry, as well as his, weird machines that he's controlling and doing all this stuff. It's big, long, and drawn out, and kind of lame, I'm not going to lie. It was cool, but it was kind of lame. After an act of heroism, Kamala realizes that she is meant to serve a purpose with her powers, and that it wasn't a mistake, and she basically single-handedly defeats MODOK. After she becomes like a Gigantor, remember that from Night at the Museum? After she becomes a Gigantor and fights the giant Kree Sentry, which MODOK has now taken full control of, she wins, and then she does the whole pass out thing. She talks with the Avengers for a little bit, and she's like, you know what, I have a favor for you. She wants to go back home. So she does. It's a nice touching moment. She's reunited with her dad, and then credits roll, to which we get a couple of end credits scenes about who's, the story is far from over. There's a new leader of AIM, and there's something else happening. Like a beacon shoots out of the Sentry at the end of the credits, and that is about less than 4 hours of gameplay. I have a lot of thoughts rolling around. I felt like that was a pretty good summation of what happens, in the final, the final act or so of this game. As far as this play session goes, we'll go this play session first, and then we'll take, kind of a deep dive into the pros and cons of how I feel about this game so far, at least about the main campaign. A few notes I had for this session. Troy Baker, along with everyone else, in the voice cast, absolutely kills it. I don't deny the legitimacy of these characters one bit, and while I do think that it's not quite as good as the Avengers that we know and love, I think it's kind of supposed to feel a little distant, supposed to feel a little bit broken, because these people haven't really associated with themselves, amongst their group for like 5 years. So it would make sense, that things would be a little bit broken. It would make sense that things would be a little bit messy in their relationship. So I think that's part of it. I think there is parts of it, too, that, just didn't quite click as well. But the performances are super duper good, and the chemistry is pretty good with a lot of the characters as well. As soon as you take control of Thor, it's like, okay, Thor's my character for sure. Like, there's no reason for me to use any other character. Like, Thor's just the guy that I'm going to use. And it was just a blast to use him. I used him every single chance I could from then on out until I had to switch, throughout the rest of the game. As I was playing through the game, it kind of occurred to me how, the story is kind of convoluted, and I wish we had more information on, it just kind of feels like they just throw all the Terrigen stuff at you, all at once, and like you're just kind of expected to like keep up with it all, and it can be kind of confusing. So I just wish that we would have kind of slowed down a little bit, and not push things along so fast to where we could kind of understand what was happening. Because by the time we get to the end of the game, it's kind of like, okay, I'm kind of confused as to what's happening. So I think that, there's some convoluted details, throughout this entire thing that I wish would have been explained a little bit more. A lot of AIM just feels like, robots and henchmen. There isn't a lot of like detail or really like any boss fights with any depth whatsoever. So you can kind of lose track and lose sight of like what actually happened and why there are Inhumans and all the, the detail, and I think a lot of the detail is missing in this game whenever it comes to like world building. And a good way to world build is with characters, and while the performances are good, the characters are kind of lacking just in stuff to do and stuff to say. There's virtually no bad guys that you fight at all, except for Abomination. So that's there's that. We come to the end of this part of the series. I'm going to give my pros and cons of the Avengers, Reassemble mission, campaign, whatever you want to call it. Let's start with the pros first. First and foremost, there are parts of this game that are an absolute blast. I mean, swinging Thor's hammer around and, like activating the Bifrost, and Kamala Khan, like her combos, like the way she feels as a character, you love using her because you love her as a character. Like that, there are definite fun parts to this game that are really, really good. I mean, there's a really, really awesome game in here somewhere. I feel like if we could have trimmed some fat and added a little more meat in a couple of places, it would have been a completely different story. I think people would have received it a lot differently. Another pro is that this game is gorgeous. It looks awesome. I played on the PS5. I did play on a 1080 monitor at 60 hertz. And it was awesome. It was, no load times whatsoever. I remember there being horrible load times on the PS4, which would have made this a lot harder to get through. But man, like, it was an awesome experience. It looked great. It was a lot of fun, to keep going. And like, each atmosphere was really, really interesting. I mentioned this before, but all the performances in this game are really, really good. The entire cast, no one is lacking. Even MODOK was good. Like, MODOK was believable. Even Abomination was good. Like, characters that didn't have as much screen time, their performances were really, really good. I already mentioned that, some characters are more amazing to use than others, whereas others did suffer. Those character moments, like with a shout or certain dialogue combined with the awesome music in this game. There's a lot of really good score in this game. Marvel feeling, like, very epic and adventurous. I love the music. But last but not least, the thing that I think this game has the most of that really, it was kind of the driving force for me, was this game has a ton of heart. You're really rooting for Kamala, pretty much through this entire time. And, there are certain characters you get to know more that, you want to see that relationship thrive. Like, you want to see her kind of get to know Bruce Banner, and you want to see her become an Avenger. That's just the fact of the matter. Like, you want to see her on the team. Like, you want to see her be a part of this team. So whenever that payoff happens, it's awesome. It's really, really cool to see that happen. And I loved certain aspects of this game a lot. But now let's get to why I think a lot of people don't like this game and why this game is so polarizing with my cons, at least so far. Even just with the campaign. I mean, I have cons with the campaign. And I'm putting this in the context of if I spent $60 on this game, how would I feel right now, And that's kind of why I decided to push through the last little bit of, this game was, okay, I took my time with most of the game. Now, how does it feel whenever you do kind of just keep playing it? How does it feel to kind of just blitz through certain parts of this game? Funny enough, that's where most of my cons came from, was that process of, playing it a little bit faster. So we'll start with one big one, the forced gameplay with all the different characters. There are certain missions where you have to use certain characters. What if I didn't like that character at all? Like, what if I only wanted to use Thor? You don't use Thor until, like, basically the last act of the game. Like, you don't have access to him for a while. There's only a handful of characters you can use. That was one thing. It was like, what if I didn't want to use Tony Stark? I didn't want to use Tony Stark several times. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to use Hulk several times. It was frustrating to switch back and forth. Whenever you found characters you enjoyed the most, being forced to, like, switch from them was kind of frustrating. Especially, like, towards the end, like the very last mission, you're playing Captain America a lot. I did not like using Captain America at all, but I was forced to. Why would you force players to use a character? Like, I don't know. And I get it, there's only so many instances of what you can do with a character, but still, like, if you're going to have access to all the characters, make it to where everyone's doing something and you can pick the path. That would have been cool. Pick the path. You would have had 6 different missions to do on the last mission if you wanted to. Or maybe, have those open up. I don't know. It's just frustrating. I didn't want to play as Captain America for the majority of that last mission. Another one is the enemies are annoying. The enemies are, for the most part, many of them are not fun to fight. And there's not really a ton of, like, explanation or repeated hints on how to beat them. So sometimes I would forget, like, exactly what I was supposed to do to combat an enemy with a shield whenever I thought I was pressing the right buttons, but I wasn't. That's whenever you have a prompt show up. We notice that you're trying to do this thing or fight this thing. Why aren't you doing this thing? So the fact that that wasn't there was annoying, combined with just repeated attempts to hit this thing and, like, it's always blocked and doing all this stuff, that it gets annoying after a while. The boss fights are so weird. The boss fights are so bad, honestly. I put myself in a position of like, okay, if I was going to play this with friends and we were going to go through these missions together, these are not fun boss fights. They're very formulaic. They're long and drawn out. And if you don't have the right character, I mean, I don't know. I would have to, you know, if you're playing by yourself, your teammates are basically useless for these boss fights. I'm just going to tell you that right now. The other Avengers are good for crowd control, and that's about it. But I mean, I was flying around for like 15 minutes trying to like kill a boss that, like, you know, the first giant tank you fight. And it was just like, oh my God, like this is taking forever. Even whenever I would like press up on the D-pad to like give me a hint, like it was still like it was taking forever. It was annoying. It was irritating. Bad boss fight design. It kind of goes into it a little bit more, but like the gameplay with some of the characters is so repetitive. I get they tried to like change that with different characters, and it's like, well, if you get sick of one character, you know, you can change to another character. I don't want to be forced to do that though. You know what I mean? Like, there were certain times where it was just like, okay, like I just feel like it's like a Dynasty Warriors game. Like I'm just trying to like button mash to like get to the next part of the game is what I felt myself doing. There is a certain like addictiveness to that, and I get why people like that because it's mindless. It's relatively mindless. There were so many skills, and there were so many character transitions. I couldn't get comfortable with any one skill set, which was frustrating. And then, you know, the argument would be, well, it's like, oh, well, you know, you can pick your character in the end game and like, you know, do all this other stuff. I can guarantee you, I do not want to spend any time doing any more missions for certain currencies. And that's the next thing is, why is there a billion currencies in this game with literally no explanation as to what they do, why I'm after them? There's no lore around any of these currencies, so it's pretty much useless. It's almost like I don't even know where to start half the time. So that's another thing that's super frustrating. Like, no, I don't want to spend my time just going after these currencies that I don't really know anything about. Like, just give me more story. Like, that's all I want is more story. Speaking of the story, though, there were a lot of really strange story choices. Like, at the very end, using a Kree sentry, and I guess it's going to play into the story later, but there's no hint of that. There's no hint that that might be something. It's just a complete, you know, drop out of the, and, you know, MODOK, did he have a power stone on his head or what? I mean, there's not a whole lot of setup for any of that. So I understand what they were trying to do, and there were parts of this game that I felt were set up pretty well, you know, story-wise for certain things, even though it was convoluted at times. Like, okay, this happened because of this, but why? Like, it's just hard to keep track of all the details, you know, of what was happening in the story. And that's probably my biggest complaint, honestly, is that certain stuff was set up well character-wise, but the overarching story was such a mess. It was so hard to keep track of. And, I mean, I think about, like, this game, you know, it had a rough launch, and had I played it, you know, religiously in the beginning, like a lot of people did, if I decided to take a break from it and then came back to it, I wouldn't even know what was going on. You know what I mean? Like, many people may not even know what Inhumans are, you know? So, I don't know. It's just, I feel like this game, and this is my final con, I feel like a big reason why this game is so polarizing is because it had an identity crisis. It didn't know exactly what it wanted to be, because there were parts of this game that were really well done. I'm just going to say it. There were parts of this game that were awesome, and there were parts of this game where I was like, oh, I hope it stays like this. But it didn't. It changed shortly after that. And I think that's why it's frustrating, is because you could have had an amazing game, but instead you settled for, you know, with sprinkles of good things. And I just, man, like, I don't know, would actually want to spend more time grinding for gear, because you can buy any of the skins you want. Like, if you want a skin, just buy it. Why not just buy it? I do think that, you know, there were a lot of details that I'm missing out on as to why this is such a big money grab. And, you know, of course, like, oh, like it's $60, you know, and it's however many hours of gameplay. You know, I spent 3.5 hours just now, an hour earlier, and then 4 other hours. So it was about 10 to 12 hours long, depending on how you play. I could have done way more in the main game that I didn't do. So in a way, I get it. Like, okay, you got a 12-hour campaign and a crappy end game, and it's just now starting to get more content. Yeah, I could see that. But I don't know, man. I don't know who would have wanted to spend more time just grinding these missions out. I know people did, though. I know people enjoyed it. There are other games you can do that with. Like, you can play something else. I don't know. I'm getting off. I'm a little ranty. It's late, but all in all, I enjoyed this game a lot in certain places, but for every place that I did like it, I equally disliked it. So yeah, there you have it. As far as a score goes, just judging it based off of the campaign and what I've played of the campaign, there weren't just as many things that I disliked as many things that I liked. There were portions of the game I enjoyed immensely more, and it was more like the small moments. There were small, annoying moments that made me want to quit playing. And, you know, I kept going, obviously. But to me, I don't think that giving this game a 6 is fair. But I also don't feel like praising this game is fair too much. So we'll go with just an average score. We'll give it a 7. And that is being generous. I don't believe in decimals. Like, it is what it is. Like, I don't want to meet anywhere in the middle. Like, it's harder to make that decision. So, you know what? No, I'm not going to do a 7. I'm deliberating a lot, I know. I'm going to give it a 6. Yeah. I think Avengers, what I played of Avengers, had good things to it, but at the end of the day, it's nothing special. And it could have been. Well, here we are almost 30 minutes later, and I hope you listened to this entire thing or watched it. That would have been rad. I know I probably could have split this up into, you know, another video, but I don't know. Like, it feels good. This feels good to kind of put a bow on this portion of the story. I will say, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep playing the game. I'm going to play the DLCs as they come out, and I'm definitely going to play the Battle for Wakanda, and I'm going to make content around it because I'm enjoying doing this and giving my thoughts, and maybe it won't be an hour at a time. Maybe sometimes it'll be an hour, sometimes it'll be 2 hours, but I'm going to make a video nonetheless. So if you stuck around for the entire series, and if you stuck around to watch me give my thoughts about the end of the game and all this other stuff, I definitely want to hear how you feel about the game, where you think the game's potential could have been. Definitely let me know in the comments down below. I definitely want to know how you feel about it, especially if you made it all the way through this. So thank you so much, and until next time, check this out. Well, whatever possessed you to check out any of the content that you saw today, I just want to say thank you so much for doing so. If you check the description down below, you'll see that there's a variety of different projects that I'm associated with. This is Wannabe Critic Productions after all. So I just wanted to say, if you enjoyed what you saw today, consider giving some of those other projects a chance as well. There's a lot of stuff that I'm a part of that I do. If you were here for me or for someone else that you saw today, again, just thank you for checking it out, and I hope to see you again. But until next time, I'm Gabriel Fast, and I'll always be the Wannabe Critic.